Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, June 12th, and we have a great show for you today. We have none other than Advisory Committee Chair Dennis Doughty. And what we're going to talk about today is the outcome of town meeting. Town meeting took place in late May and early June, just a few weeks ago. Town meeting had both financial and other policy matters before it. Today, we're just going to talk about the financial decisions, the budget and the CPA, Community Preservation Act. Next week, we're going to talk about other policy decisions. I hope you'll stay tuned today and you'll watch next week. Before we do either, though, we're going to go through the news. Protests continue to grow in the United States. In response to President Trump's mass deportation policies, the use of masked and otherwise unidentifiable federal agents, and his deployment of the National Guard on demonstrators in Los Angeles. The Republican Big Beautiful Bill continues to be debated in the Senate, where members have pushed back on cuts to SNAP, Medicare, and reductions of climate tax credits. The American Clean Power Association reported that the United States added a record 1,602 megawatts of battery storage capacity in the first quarter of 2025. A Massachusetts Superior Court judge ruled last week that the MBTA Communities Act is not an unfunded mandate. The Secretary of Administration and Finance has projected that the state would collect over $3 billion from the fair share tax in the 2024-2025 fiscal year. Passed by ballot initiative, the fair share is a 4% income tax only on income in excess of $1 million and is required to be spent on education and transportation. Democrat Lisa Field claimed victory over Republican Larry Quintal by a 21-vote margin last night in a special election to fill the seat left vacant by the death of Representative Carol Doherty earlier this year. Quintal is calling for a recount in the election to represent the 3rd Bristol District. The Brookline School Committee launched its efforts to find an interim superintendent for the beginning of the 2025-2026 school year, interviewing 5 candidates last week. Brookline boys volleyball defeated Newton North, the defending state champs, but to advance to the Division I state final. Due to challenges coming from Washington, Brookline's libraries are preparing to protect the town's library system, including tapping into funding from donations and continued services. Folks, that's the news. Stay tuned for the interview recorded just a few days ago with Dennis Doughty, chair of the advisory committee. And again, we're going to talk about the financial decisions made by town meeting in our annual 2025 town meeting just a few weeks ago. Stay tuned. And we're back on TV with, as promised, chair of the advisory committee, Dennis Doughty. And we like to bring someone from the advisory committee, often Dennis, at the end of a run of town meeting to run through some of the highlights. There's so many highlights, but some of the highlights of our town meeting. And so, Dennis Doughty, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This town meeting was interesting because, and I'm sure we'll get to this when we talk, but very little controversy over the budget compared to previous years, although there were a few items that we will talk about in more detail.
And I would say, in general, there were many votes that I thought would pass with 30 or 40 opposed, that passed with 3 or 4 opposed. And I'm not sure that that matters much, but I expected a few more naysayers here and there that never really showed up, and I'm not sure why. But let's start with the big nut. In the Maytown meeting, really the most important warrant article is the budget, and the budget is between $400 and $500 million, and the town must have a budget. Dennis, as you know, the budget is quite detailed on the town side. But under state law, it is the school committee who decides the details on the school side, and they're welcome to share their vision with us beforehand, but ultimately they have authority on school spending. So the town meeting spends most of its time talking about the town side. And Warren article came up. I think two things were particularly interesting. The first one I want to talk about is trash collection. Can you run us through the decision point that we were facing on trash collection?
I'd be happy to do that. If you don't mind, if I could give like a 30-second background on the budget just in general, that would be awesome. Um, the Because I think it's important to recognize that um, the budget is put together over a course of 3 to 6 month process of public review and public discussion of all items that are going to come before town meeting, and we sit down with all the department heads and review their plans. And I think that one of the issues that came up this time around, which contributed to the discussion around the DPW budget, was the sense that at least one element of its budget, in this case, solid waste removal, had not gotten as much attention as it otherwise might have. It's not to say that it didn't happen during public meetings, but that in many cases, the fact that it was discussed at a public meeting wasn't as widely publicized as it might have been. And so there were some people who felt surprised by it. And so part of this process of reviewing the DPW's budget was trying to catch up and understand all the factors that went into it. So the controversy on the table is that the town has decided to outsource solid waste collection to its recycling partner, Casella. This was not an easy decision for the town to make. It stemmed from several years of concerns regarding the ability for the town to reliably collect solid waste. There were lots of issues with finding staff, hiring and retaining staff in the DPW. So there were a lot of times that the town found itself borrowing people from other branches of the DPW to go on the trash collection route, and not everyone responded favorably to that. They found that to be an imposition on their ability to do their regular jobs. And so over a period of time, the DPW went through a bidding process with a few local providers, selected a contract with Casella, and was bringing a budget to town meeting that would involve transferring DPW workers who had previously been doing trash collection into other positions and transitioning solid waste collection out to Casella. So that's the background. So now if you want to go into some of the details, we can.
So the decision point for town meeting was whether or not to allow this contract to go forward. The contract explicitly said subject to the funding of town meeting, and that um, I think appropriately gave town meeting a say as to whether or not trash collection would remain in-house, and the town would have to fight through these challenges and staffing and so forth, or to outsource to Casella, a move that I think was asserted to be very, very difficult to ever undo later. And I don't think anyone sort of objected to that claim. That once you privatize the service, it's very difficult to bring it back in-house. And so I think that, the question is, um, well, one, what did we do? But if you're willing to wade in the waters, what do you think moved town meeting from one side to the other? Because I think at the beginning of the debate, town meeting as a whole was in a different place than it ended.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way that this, I think that the discussions that happen at the advisory committee are basically a microcosm for the discussions that happened at town meeting, which is not a surprise. Um, but because I think that a number of people on the advisory committee came in with the exact same sentiment that you had, which is we prefer private collection of trash for a variety of reasons. Um, Control over that process being top amongst them, but also the flexibility that is conferred by having the ability to have a set of employees that are available to do other things in the event of an emergency, which is something that happens less frequently now than it used to. But it used to be the case that you would see snow removal back when we did a lot more snow removal happen as a result of DPW trash sanitation workers also filling in on snow removal. Um, And then a general vibe sense, if you will, that outsourcing is something to be avoided, is certainly a sentiment that a number of people have. The idea that a for-profit corporation will clearly cost more money than something that's being done by the public sector. Um, with that said, however, as we went through the discussion, it became clear that there were a number of things that were true. Number one, the DPW had spent and they took us through it, and they took town meeting through it as well. An extensive set of policy changes, process changes, um, different ways of trying to attract, retain workers in that particular division. And we don't have to go into all the details of some of the concerns that had been expressed either by the actual workers or by management. Just the idea that there had been an extensive process that went into that. The sense that the DPW commissioner, Erin Shute, is highly regarded. And when she speaks with passion and conviction about the work that she's gone through, I think that's very influential in terms of people understanding that this effort was taken extremely seriously. It is not taken on a whim, and then also the discussion of some of the advantages that confer by giving this service to an entity that has done very good job for the town on recycling and does a very good job in the neighboring communities. Um, they have their own economies of scale that the town can't bring to the process of solid waste collection. And so the idea that it is necessarily something that will always be significantly more expensive from an outsourcing perspective was also not necessarily borne out. Although I think there's no doubt that it will be more expensive. And at the end of the day, the motion that was on the table, which was to ask the town to back out of the contract that it had signed with Casella, um, extend our existing relationship for trash collection for 1 year while we explore other options, which also means not selling our trucks in the process, undoing a bunch of things that have been put in place. Has the advantage of giving us more time to explore other options, but it also has a large destabilizing factor because there's a lot of unknowns about what the short term would actually look like. And I believe that town meeting ultimately decided that the potential downside of trying to undo the process that we were in um, exceeded the potential upside of what might come out of that process, and that the flip side of that, the calculation worked in the inverse. And so it wasn't a slam dunk decision by any stretch of the imagination. The motion to substitute to extend the existing service got 66 votes. So it was one of the higher minority votes that happened during this particular town meeting, but it still ultimately failed.
And so the town has voted to outsource the trash collection. It's not like your day of trash is going to be any different. I think your trash barrel is going to be the same. So for residents, you probably won't observe any material difference anytime soon. You would still call the town if there's a problem. So folks at home, interesting debate at town meeting. Hopefully, zero impact for the residents, right? Which I think was the goal. We
Right.
also,
If I might interrupt, and I apologize, there's one thing I'd like to clarify there is that I do think that certain aspects, the mechanisms by which certain things happen, might change, although it's not clear whether that will be a substantive impact or not. So I believe it is the case the town will still be doing the collection of the large, bulky objects independently of the trash removal. but the actual timing of that could change as a result of this. But the town will still take it away. And I still think there are open questions about things like trash amnesty day and the like, which has been something that has been very popular in the community for the past several years. In the spring and the fall, you have basically spring cleaning days where you can just throw out everything that you want. And whether the town will take responsibility for that, whether Casella would take responsibility for that, whether it will still exist, I still think is something that has to be negotiated moving forward.
So a few details. Dennis, the during the period of time when town meeting members can ask department heads questions, there were a lot of questions about fire department staffing because, in fact, the town has implemented a change in fire department staffing policy. Without spending a lot of time on it, can you just kind of run us through what that's about and maybe what we should expect going forward in the conversation?
Yes. So to back up, uh, for several years now, the town has been dealing from a budget perspective with increases in fire department overtime. Um, and there are a lot of reasons why that can happen. The fire department is a department that is, as you might imagine, prone to injury from job-related injuries. There were clearly a number of COVID-related outages during the peak of the pandemic. Um, but the downstream effect of that is twofold. One is it it's a burden on the town's budget because overtime is expensive. Um, but it also is kind of cascading because as you bring people in for overtime, then they need comp time to cover for that, sometimes down, depending on how the contract works out and the like. And so it's hard to get out from under. Um, and so that's one of the pieces of background, and we've been adjusting the budget over time to try to address it. Um, there's a memo that was put out by the Associate Town Administrator for Finance that tried to analyze overtime and sick day requests that I won't go into, but I would encourage any of the viewers to go find and read, which talks about some of the patterns of overtime and sick time from the fire department. And the recommendation that came out of that was that by giving the fire chief the flexibility to uh, to amend the staffing requirements for trucks from a system that's called 3+1 to a system that's called 2+1, which has to do with the number of firefighters that would go out on any particular call at any particular time, giving him the flexibility to adjust that, particularly in periods where the number of firefighters who are available to be called in for work um, would significantly reduce this overtime cost in the budget, but would in practicality have a very limited impact on the actual number of staff that would go out on any individual call at any individual time. That's not to say that by reducing those requirements, there couldn't be or there wouldn't be situations in which there would be fewer people involved in the initial response to a particular call. But on average, there would be very, very little impact. And so that. I'm not saying that that's true. That is the position that the town has taken, and you will not be surprised to hear that there are competing positions. And so the question, we're very early in this process. The town has sent notice to the union that says we are taking this step. I honestly don't know what the date is. It's sometime in the next month that it would officially kick in. There will be no impact on fire staffing immediately because in order to achieve this goal, requires additional training for firefighters. Certain policies have to change when you have a different number of staff I think you asked this question at town meeting about this in particular. There are definitely training that goes into it. So it will be some number of months before there's any impact. And during those months, you can be assured that there will be negotiations between town administration and the union, which fall into the area of collective bargaining. We can't get involved in it. We won't talk about it. We'll see what comes out the other end. But we're at the beginning of this process now.
So I want to move to the CPA, the Community Preservation Act, and it's great. You know, we're doing this show. We're focusing on spending, and then next week we can talk about sort of other policy changes that came through town meeting. But you know, we only have a half hour. CPA, the Community Preservation Act, of course, it's funded by a surcharge on our property tax. So the townspeople voted to raise our property taxes, and this surcharge goes into a bucket. And sometimes the state throws in some extra money, but there are rules. You can only spend it on affordable housing, on historic preservation, and on certain kinds of park, open space, and recreation. And you have to spend at least a little bit of it on all of them. This year, we had a lot of CPA items and not a lot of controversy. Um, can you take us through at least maybe some of the bigger items, or maybe some new ideas? Maybe there's been seems to be a change in philosophy from last year about where the money tends to be going. What are the vibes on CPA?
Yeah, I mean, so the one thing that you left out of that description is, and I think this is really important also, is that it's really intended to be additive in terms of where the spend. It's not supposed to substitute for money you would already have spent on capital projects, and so that tends to be on the margins, at least some debate about, is this a project that would have otherwise been funded out of the Parks and Recreation budget or the like. So this year we're spending $4.5 million, I believe, in that ballpark on preservation. Um, and so there's repairs to the Egmont Street roof. There's some work that's being done at Hall's Pond. Um, I'm trying to grab the list, which I don't have in front of me, unfortunately. And I would say probably the biggest item that had some question associated with it is the historical preservation at Temple Ohabe Shalom. And the standard question that comes up and during CPA debates whenever public funds are being spent for an essentially private institution is it reasonable for public funds to be spent to do preservation or restoration at a private institution? And the discussion always comes down to it often comes down to what are the public services that are being provided by that institution, and do we have kind of a long-term guarantee that those services will be continued to be provided? And in the case of Ohave Shalom, there's a significant number of public events that are hosted there. They're very good citizen contributor to the neighborhood, and there appear to be long-standing guarantees that will continue to be true in the future. And so the CPA committee was comfortable spending those funds. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that
Or
was interesting.
quite a few large initiatives.
Lars Anderson's ice rink. Yeah, I mean, there's the uh I don't have a lot personally to say about the ice rink. I mean, perhaps you've got questions or comments to take us where this conversation might want to go. I think that it's something that has been in the public's eye for quite some time, but not something that has gotten significant DPW attention.
By number of projects and by dollars, clearly last year's focus was affordable housing. Did that carry through this year, or did we see a shift?
I will have to I'll have to bring up the list because I don't actually know off the top of my head. I'm sorry to say. So I apologize for not being prepared to answer that
No,
question.
that's, we don't go over the questions ahead of time in any detail. I think you will discover that there was a shift toward spending on facilities owned by the town government rather than the Brookline Housing Authority, and that there was a much bigger shift towards park, open space, and recreation. I think that's because it took the town institutions, town staff, a little longer to kind of figure out the value of the CPA to the town and their particular institution within the town. Um, Maybe the affordable housing folks were more prepared right out of the gate, and so I think the CPA saw more applications from town
Yeah,
agencies.
yeah, I think what you're saying is correct, but I think that the last sentence that you said is in some sense the most important. The CPA does not go out and look for work. It responds to requests that were made. So there was only one housing related request that was made, which was for the Egmont Street roof repair, and there were many other project requests. And then the other thing that the CPA does, which I think is important because it has to do with um, broadening the impact of the broadening the impact of the dollars and also demonstrating the broad-based support for the community is it tries to allocate funds to projects that have also received grant funding or funding from other sources because that shows that it has broader appeal and also that its funds will go farther because there are matching funds that are coming along.
Yeah, I did see quite a bit of that. And matching doesn't always mean 50-50, but at
Right.
least some contribution somewhere else. Do we, was there any controversy on any of these CPA items? Did anybody sort of say, no, we don't want to do this or any tension?
Not in my recollection. Last year there was some there was some concern primarily around a couple of allocations that were being made to private entities for which there was some concern. The only concern this time around was a small amount of money that was going to be spent on restoration of some freezes at the Pierce School, and the question of whether that um, would fall into funds that should have come out of the Pierce School project itself. It was clear, though, that it was something that while it will be within that building footprint, it is not something that was anticipated as part of the original design for the project, and it is something that has a preservation impact, and so it was considered a worthwhile expenditure.
Well, Dennis, just like town meeting itself, sometimes we can't get all the way through the work in one go. I'm glad today we talked about the money, which is um, for folks like the advisory committee, a massive effort. I think for some town meeting members, it's sort of like those are the vegetables in order to get to the dessert, which is policy related. Um, but obviously, it's critically important to the town. Uh, I think um, I think we did a good job of covering what was controversial or interesting in the budget. Of course, the budget is a many hundreds page document and it's available online, and folks should feel free to get right into it if they want, and ponder the reality that free cash is neither free nor cash. Um, but really, that's all the time we have this week. We talked budget, we talked CPA. Um, Tune in next week and maybe you'll find folks talking about uh, a myriad of policy changes that made its way through town meeting. But that's all the time we have for now. So, Dennis, I want to thank you for coming on the show. And viewers, I want to thank you for watching TV on TV right here on Brookline Interactive Group. We will see you next week.
Thank you.